So you thought you knew the whole story, huh? That's adorable. You remember the arguments, the apologies, the promises, the nights you spent wondering what went wrong. And maybe you convinced yourself that you were the problem, because that was easier than accepting that you never had all the information. Funny how people can look innocent when you only see the version of themselves they carefully decided to show you. But time has a nasty habit of exposing what people try to bury. The things they avoided explaining. The stories that never quite added up. The little contradictions you ignored because you wanted to trust them. And now, maybe you're finally seeing those moments differently, not because you need to hate them, but because you finally understand that closure doesn't always come from an apology. Sometimes it comes from clarity. You don't need revenge. You don't need to expose every detail. You don't need to spend your life proving that they weren't as innocent as they pretended to be. You simply need to stop rewriting your own memories to protect someone else's image. Maybe you ignored the red flags because you loved them. Maybe you accepted explanations that never really made sense because you wanted the relationship to work. That's human. It doesn't make you foolish. It means you cared. But caring doesn't mean you have to keep defending someone who repeatedly made you question your own reality. And here's the part that changes everything. Their secrets don't have to become your obsession. Let the truth reveal itself through facts, consistent behavior, and time. Don't turn suspicion into certainty without evidence. Don't let anger make decisions that your calmer mind will regret later. You survived the relationship. You survived the confusion. You survived the version of yourself that kept searching for answers from someone who may never have been capable of giving them, honestly. Now you get to stop chasing the missing pieces and start rebuilding the person who was standing there the entire time, quietly waiting for you to realize that whatever they hid, whatever they denied, whatever finally comes to light, it doesn't get to decide the value of the person you become after walking away, while the truth unfolds without you having to force it, and you finally learn to look forward instead of spending another day staring at a chapter that already taught you everything it was capable of teaching you. Maybe the hardest part isn't accepting what happened. It's accepting how much of the past you had to rewrite just to keep believing in someone. You remember the good moments, the promises, the laughter, the plans, and then you remember the moments that never quite made sense. The explanations that felt incomplete. The behavior that didn't match the words. But because you cared, you became an editor of your own memories, cutting out uncomfortable scenes and giving generous explanations to things you would never have accepted from anyone else. That's what attachment can do. It can make you defend a person while quietly abandoning yourself. And then one day, something changes. You stop asking, how can I make their behavior make sense? And start asking, why was I working so hard to make it make sense in the first place? That's a painful question, but it's also a freeing one. You don't need to rewrite the past anymore. You don't need to turn them into a monster. And you don't need to turn yourself into the villain either. People can be complicated. Someone can have good qualities and still make harmful choices. Someone can love you in certain moments and still fail to treat you with the honesty or respect you deserved. You don't have to create a perfect hero or a perfect villain just to understand that a relationship wasn't healthy for you. That's where maturity begins. You can say, there were good memories, and there were things I should never have tolerated. Both can be true. You can miss someone and still know leaving was necessary. You can care about someone and still stop giving them access to your life. You can forgive someone and still remember the lesson. Forgiveness doesn't require you to pretend nothing happened. It simply means you stop allowing the past to control every decision you make today. And when new information comes out, be careful. Don't immediately turn every rumor into proof. Don't let anger become your detective. Look for facts. Look for consistent behavior. Look at what you actually know. The goal isn't to build a case against your ex like you're preparing for court. The goal is to stop lying to yourself about what you experienced. If something was wrong, you can acknowledge it without exaggerating it. If you made mistakes, you can own them without accepting responsibility for someone else's choices. That's a powerful distinction. You don't have to carry guilt that doesn't belong to you. Maybe you ignored warning signs. Fine. Learn from that. Maybe you trusted too quickly. Learn from that. Maybe you stayed longer than you should have. Learn from that too. But don't turn those lessons into reasons to hate yourself. You were making decisions with the information and emotional state you had at the time. Now you have more information. Now you know more. Now you can choose differently. That's growth. And the most important thing is refusing to let their version of the story become your identity. They may remember the relationship differently. They may tell people a different story. They may never admit what they did. That's outside your control. Your responsibility is to remember your own experience honestly, take the lessons that belong to you, release the blame that doesn't, and stop spending your future trying to repair a past that no longer has the authority to define you. Because the moment you stop rewriting the story to make someone else look innocent, you finally give yourself permission to see the entire picture without excuses, without unnecessary hatred, and without carrying their choices as if they were your responsibility, while you begin rebuilding your life around what is true now rather than what you desperately wished had been true back then. Words are easy. Anyone can say, "Trust me," especially when they know exactly what you want to hear. Promises are cheap, apologies are cheap, and explanations can be polished until they sound almost believable. But behavior is much less cooperative. It keeps happening when nobody is preparing a speech. It shows up when someone is frustrated, when they think they're not being watched, when they don't need anything from you, and when the situation becomes inconvenient. That's where you start seeing the difference between what someone says and who they consistently choose to be. You don't need to become obsessed with every little detail from the past. You simply need to stop ignoring patterns because the words sounded comforting. Maybe they promised they would change, but the same problem appeared again. Maybe they said they respected you, but repeatedly crossed boundaries. Maybe they claimed everything was fine while their actions kept telling a completely different story. One incident doesn't automatically explain an entire person. People make mistakes. People have bad days. People can genuinely regret something and grow from it. But repeated behavior is different. When the same pattern keeps returning after conversations, promises, and apologies, eventually you have to stop studying the explanation and start studying the behavior. That's not bitterness. That's awareness. And awareness doesn't mean assuming the worst. It means refusing to let a beautiful sentence erase an ugly pattern. You can listen to someone's apology without immediately restoring the same level of trust. You can accept an explanation without pretending it automatically fixes everything. Trust isn't a light switch. Someone doesn't get to break it on Monday, apologize on Tuesday, and demand full access again on Wednesday because they said the magic words. Trust is rebuilt through consistency, quietly, repeatedly over time. And if consistency never appears, that tells you something too. Maybe you once believed that loving someone meant giving them unlimited chances. Then you learned that unlimited chances can become unlimited permission. You don't have to keep reopening the same door just because someone knocks differently this time. Watch what happens after the apology. Watch what happens after the promise. Watch what happens when there is no immediate reward for behaving well. That's where character becomes visible. Anyone can perform for a few days when they fear losing something. The real question is what happens when the pressure disappears. Do their actions remain respectful? Do they take responsibility without blaming everyone else? Do they stop repeating the behavior? Do they respect your boundaries even when they don't like them? Those answers matter more than dramatic speeches. And here's the part that can save you a lot of pain. You don't need to investigate someone's entire life to decide what treatment you will accept. You don't need every secret exposed. You don't need every missing detail explained. If someone's consistent behavior makes you feel unsafe, disrespected, manipulated, or exhausted, that's already enough information to reconsider your boundaries. You're allowed to make decisions based on what you actually experienced. You don't need a courtroom verdict to protect your peace, but stay honest with yourself too. Don't twist neutral behavior into evidence just because you're hurt. Don't turn every unanswered question into proof of betrayal. Look at the full pattern. Separate facts from assumptions. Ask what you know, what you suspect, and what you simply fear might be true. That's how you protect yourself without becoming trapped inside suspicion. Because the goal isn't to discover a reason to hate someone. The goal is to become wise enough that their words no longer have more power than their actions. And once you learn to judge consistency instead of promises, you stop being impressed by explanations that disappear the moment circumstances become difficult. You start trusting evidence over performance, patterns over speeches, and time over temporary displays of regret, allowing people's repeated choices to tell you what their carefully prepared words never could, while you remain calm enough to recognize reality without needing to turn every unanswered question into another reason to lose your peace. Revenge sounds powerful until you realize how much of your life it can steal from you. You spend hours imagining the perfect response, the perfect message, the perfect moment when they finally understand what they lost, and suddenly you're still living inside a relationship that already ended. What a beautiful little trap. They walked away, but somehow you're still giving them rent-free space in your head. You don't need that. If the truth eventually comes out, let it speak for itself. If people finally discover what happened, you don't need to stand on a stage waving evidence around like you've been waiting for your courtroom debut. Your peace is worth more than proving someone else was wrong. Maybe they lied. Maybe they hid things. Maybe they told a different version of the story to protect their reputation. You can't control what they say, but you can control whether you spend the next 5 years trying to correct every sentence. That's where revenge becomes a second prison. You think you're punishing them, but you're actually keeping yourself emotionally attached. Every angry post, every argument, every attempt to expose them keeps the connection alive. And if you're serious about moving forward, why keep feeding a connection you already decided was unhealthy? Let the facts stand where they stand. If someone asks what happened, tell the truth without decorating it. If someone doesn't believe you, let them believe what they want. You don't have to chase every person who chooses the wrong version of the story. People are allowed to misunderstand you. That's their decision. Your decision is whether their misunderstanding gets to control your mood. And here's the funny part. Sometimes the most powerful response isn't dramatic at all. It's becoming unavailable for the chaos. You stop answering unnecessary messages. You stop checking their profiles. You stop asking mutual friends for updates. You stop wondering who they're with, what they're doing, whether they're happy, whether they regret it. Because every time you check, you're handing your attention back to a chapter you're supposed to be closing. You don't need revenge when distance is already doing its job. You don't need to destroy their reputation when their own choices eventually speak for themselves. Time is very good at removing makeup from stories. People can maintain an image for a while, but consistency has a way of exposing what performance tries to hide. And if nothing ever comes out, fine. You still win by moving forward. That's important. Your healing cannot depend on the world discovering that you were right. If your peace requires everyone else to admit they were wrong, then your peace still belongs to them. Take it back. You can acknowledge what happened without making it your entire identity. You can be angry without becoming consumed by anger. You can remember the betrayal without turning your future into a revenge project. You can learn the lesson and leave the classroom. And if they someday return with an apology, you don't have to decide anything in the heat of the moment. Listen if you want. Evaluate the behavior. Decide what protects your life now. An apology isn't a contract requiring you to reopen the door. Closure doesn't always arrive through a conversation. Sometimes closure is simply realizing you don't need another explanation to know what you experienced mattered. You don't need them to confess every hidden detail before you allow yourself to move on. You don't need them to suffer before you allow yourself to heal. You don't need the final word, because your future can become the final answer. And the most satisfying thing isn't watching someone else fall apart because of what they did to you. It's waking up one morning and discovering that their name no longer has the power to change your heartbeat, your plans, your confidence, or your direction, while you keep building a life so focused on what comes next that the person who once occupied so much of your attention becomes nothing more than a lesson you remember without needing to reopen the wound, just to prove that it once existed. And here's where you have to be careful, because when you've been hurt, your mind starts looking for patterns everywhere. Suddenly, every strange message feels suspicious, every delayed reply feels like evidence, every mutual friend seems like they must know something, and every little coincidence starts looking like part of some enormous hidden story. Your brain loves a mystery, especially when your heart is still angry. But suspicion isn't the same thing as truth. That's an important distinction if you want to protect your peace without losing your grip on reality. You can feel that something was wrong without immediately deciding exactly what happened. You can notice inconsistencies without turning them into a complete accusation. You can question someone's behavior without pretending you already know their intentions. That's not weakness. That's discipline. Because when you're emotionally wounded, certainty can feel comforting. You want an explanation. You want somebody to blame. You want all the missing pieces to suddenly fit together so you can finally say, "See, I knew it." But sometimes you don't have enough information to know, and pretending otherwise only creates another problem. You start living inside a story that may not even be true. That's how anger becomes a terrible detective. It collects anything that supports what you already believe and ignores everything that doesn't. Very convenient. Very dangerous. So slow down. Ask yourself what you actually know. What did you personally experience? What can you verify? What did someone directly tell you? What are you assuming because the situation hurts? Those questions can save you from making decisions based on emotions that will eventually cool down. Maybe there really were things they hid. Maybe there were genuine contradictions. Maybe you discovered behavior that gave you every reason to step away. If so, you don't need to exaggerate the story to justify protecting yourself. The facts are enough. And if you later discover that some of your assumptions were wrong, that's okay too. Being wrong about one suspicion doesn't make you foolish. It means you were trying to understand a confusing situation while emotionally involved. Give yourself permission to update your understanding when new information appears. That's what intelligent people do. They don't cling to a conclusion just because they already announced it. They adjust. They learn. They move forward. And you should do the same. Don't let someone else's actions turn you into a person who sees betrayal everywhere. One dishonest person doesn't mean everyone is dishonest. One painful relationship doesn't mean love itself is a trap. One bad experience doesn't mean you have to spend the rest of your life expecting the next person to hurt you. That's how the past keeps controlling the future. Instead, carry the lesson without carrying the fear. Set boundaries based on evidence. Trust gradually. Watch consistency. Communicate clearly. If someone repeatedly gives you reasons not to trust them, you can step back without needing to prove they're secretly evil. If someone demonstrates respect over time, You can allow trust to grow without pretending you're guaranteed never to be hurt again. That's balance. You don't need to become suspicious of everyone to become wiser. You simply need to become more intentional about who gets access to your time, energy, emotions, and private life. And if your ex truly hid something important, the truth doesn't become more true because you become obsessed with discovering every detail. It already is what it is. Your responsibility is not to investigate every shadow. Your responsibility is to decide what the information you genuinely have means for your life now. Because sometimes the healthiest conclusion isn't, I need to know everything they did. But I know enough to know what I will never tolerate again. And that realization gives you something revenge never could. The ability to walk forward without needing every unanswered question to be solved before you allow yourself to breathe again, while facts remain facts, assumptions remain assumptions, and your future remains yours to build without allowing suspicion, anger, or an old relationship to become the author of every decision you make from this point forward. And then comes the part nobody warns you about. After everything ends, you have to find yourself again. Not the version of you that existed before the relationship, not some perfect version that never gets hurt, but the version that can finally stand on its own without needing someone else's approval to feel valuable. Because when a relationship takes up enough space in your mind, you can slowly forget where they end and where you begin. Their opinions become your mirror. Their attention becomes your validation. Their approval becomes the little reward you keep chasing even after they've stopped giving it. And that's when you realize the breakup wasn't only about losing another person. It was also about losing the habit of organizing your life around another person's reactions. So now you rebuild. Quietly, you start remembering what you liked before you were constantly trying to impress somebody. You return to goals you abandoned. You reconnect with people who make you feel like yourself. You start taking care of your body, your mind, your time, your money, your future. Nothing glamorous at first. Just small decisions that say, I'm important too. And maybe that's the part they never expected. They expected you to stay stuck in the story. They expected you to keep checking, wondering, comparing, remembering. But you begin moving. Not because you suddenly stopped caring, but because you finally understood that caring about someone doesn't require sacrificing your entire identity. You can remember the good moments without wanting the relationship back. You can acknowledge the pain without becoming addicted to it. You can wish someone well from a distance and still know they don't belong in your future. That's a strange kind of freedom. You stop needing to prove that you were the better person. You stop competing with whoever comes after you. You stop checking whether they're happier without you. Because seriously, what kind of victory is that? Spending your new life monitoring the old one. That's not freedom. That's surveillance with feelings. Your real victory is becoming so occupied with your own growth that their life becomes irrelevant to your daily decisions. You don't need them to regret leaving. You don't need them to come back. You don't need mutual friends reporting every little development. You don't need a final conversation where everything is perfectly explained. Sometimes the final conversation is the one you have with yourself. I know what happened. I know what I learned. I know what I deserve now. That's enough. From there, you become more selective. You notice red flags sooner. You communicate your boundaries earlier. You stop confusing chemistry with compatibility. You stop mistaking attention for commitment. You stop believing that love requires you to constantly prove your worth. And if someone new enters your life, you don't hand them the keys simply because they make you feel good for a few weeks. You watch. You listen. You allow time to reveal character. That's not cynicism. That's wisdom with scars. You learn the hard way, so you don't have to keep learning the same lesson forever. The past can remain a chapter without becoming the entire book. And whatever your ex hid, whatever they admitted, whatever they denied, Whatever the truth eventually reveals, none of it gets to decide who you become next. Because your future doesn't need their confession, their apology, their regret, or their permission. It needs your attention, your discipline, your self-respect, and the courage to finally stop looking backward long enough to notice how much life is still waiting in front of you. While the person you once thought you couldn't live without slowly becomes proof that you can survive losing someone and still discover a stronger, calmer, wiser version of yourself standing where the broken version used to be, carrying the lesson instead of the burden, protecting your peace instead of chasing explanations, and moving forward without needing the past to change, before you allow yourself to change with it.